inspiration. A foundation still important today, the process of sharing words strung together that help point out the way, the many voices within each page. Turn pages from the past that resonate with you today. Turn pages today that create an escape within your mind. Turn pages that express a treasure within your tomorrow. Turn pages that hold a future for you to follow. We are turning pages.
My name is Phillip Thompson. I'm the Executive Director and Board President of the Idaho Black History Museum. The first black church established in Idaho was actually founded by my great-great-grandfather. I grew up here in Boise, Idaho, and attending this church. Being a black child growing up in Idaho, we were far and few between. There weren't very many of us. One thing that was always stressed was the importance of us holding ourselves accountable and being the best version of ourselves that we could. Whether it be speaking properly, whether it be dressing a certain way, whether it be making sure that you only get an A or a B, and really thriving and striving to make sure you're your best version of yourself in order to be taken seriously. And that point was kind of driven home in this book called Sit In, How Four Friends Stood Up by Sitting Down. They calmly protested what they saw was an unjust situation, but doing so in a dignified manner. One quote from the book is, "Demonstrate calm dignity." That once again drives home the importance of you have to hold yourself accountable and hold yourself to a standard that you're not going to lower your level of politeness or rightness. Often, like when you speak to your grandparents or an elder in the family, your parents teach you to speak to them in a respectful way, to say sir and say ma'am, or hold them in a certain regard. That's what was expected by us as a child. We were always taught to respect others and treat them accordingly. And yes, they should respect you as well, but they may not do so, but you are still expected to, and it's best to always treat others with respect. I remember growing up in this church that I had the luxury of having a very large social circle because my entire family went to the church, the in-laws went to the church, and the church was kind of like an extension of the black community. The community was quite small back then, but my mother always pressed upon us the importance of everybody knows who you are. You're going to be a known entity because there's not many black people here. So again, hold yourself responsible and accountable and be your best self at all times. Growing up in Boise, Idaho, I personally love Boise, Idaho. It's a very fun city in the sense that there's plenty to do inside and outside. When I was a child, I just took my kid the other day to this little creek that's in the north end by Elm Grove Park. We used to be able to freely access this canal that runs into the city before they put up the bars back in the day. We'd all, as a crew, crawl up under the city and catch crawdads, which was like the greatest thing to do in Boise during the summers. And then we also had Elm Grove Park nearby. Everybody would hang out and play there. And if we really wanted to get it in, everybody would trek over to Camel's Back Park, which behind it is miles and miles of rolling hills. So as a child, I had kind of what I see as like a utopia upbringing. There's no crime in Boise. Everybody knew everybody in the neighborhood. We had a school that was diverse, for lack of a better word, as far as Boise was concerned back in the 80s and 90s. So growing up here, I thought Boise was great. A part of my family's history being in Boise, Idaho is, for those of you who are a big Broncos fan, everybody loves the Broncos, my grandfather was the first black athlete at Boise State University. He played football, baseball, and basketball. And so he was like the first official black Bronco. And then his daughter, who's my mother, is the first black elected to the Idaho legislature. She was a senator and she was a legislator. And so our family has been in Idaho and contributed to Idaho for quite some time. In this book, you learn about the passing of the Civil Rights Act that got rid of segregation. And a fun fact that many aren't aware of is Idaho actually passed civil rights legislation 3 years before our federal government did. And my grandmother, who was my mother's mother, was actually on the committee and worked with the legislature to pass those laws. So Boise is rather unique in its version of Black history because there weren't many of us here, but because we were such a small number, we were afforded opportunities that were denied Blacks in the vast majority of America. One point in particular is my great-great-grandfather bought land in Idaho back in like 1912, 1915. I've got the mortgage. It closed in 1917 when he paid the land off. And in the vast majority of America, Blacks didn't have the opportunity to buy land in the early 1900s, but in Idaho we could do that. And 105 years later, that land is still in the family. And so I actually lived in it like 10 years ago. And so that's kind of a cool part about the history of Idaho and my own personal familial history here, is that having been here so long, we have these little institutions of our family having been here, that I have a 10-year-old daughter that I get to teach her and take her to this museum, and she learns about not just the history of her people, but the history of her family. And so what we try to do when we tell like the history of Idaho or Black history in Idaho is we have the exhibits on hand that are of course directed towards adults, but we also try to do a version for kids that appeals and applies to you directly. So we have something that's interesting and not just boring you to death with those things of interest to the old people such as myself. My name is Phillip Thompson with the Idaho Black History Museum, and this is my story.
We stem from simple memorization, memories of the epic odysseys that allowed the blind to see and freely roam, aspirations of a hero's return home, pictures painted, whether full of truth or slightly fabricated, haunted by mystery and a dream, the scheme to reveal a message, a moral learned, a choral serene, large enough to leave a mark on the hearts of those who open their ears to hear the underlying theme, inspiration. A foundation still important today, the process of sharing words strung together that help point out the way, the many voices within each page, the relationship between character and reader, storyteller, narrator, business owner to a teacher, musician, filmmaker, politicians, and a variety of leaders, breeding braids and waves that weave tales, webbed together to connect a community. Pages, one by one, are turning in unity. Over years, from parchment and scroll to a bind, we find new enlightenment from the old. A gift from a mere book, soup that warms the soul, or an impact on a mind that seeks purpose, a ripple from a pebble that dives under the surface. From off the shelf we carry a compass, the blueprint of navigation to our circumference. With wisdom at the steering wheel, we will always feel accomplished. Peel back the cover, discover the scent of borrowed time, turn pages from the past that resonate with you today, turn pages today that create an escape within your mind, turn pages that express a treasure within your tomorrow, turn pages that hold a future for you to follow. We are turning pages.